What's up, everybody? Welcome to Actuali Podcast. We are live on YouTube, Twitch, and Facebook, streaming Meaning Making 101. And in this episode, it's going to be part 15 of John Vervaake's Awakening from the Meaning Crisis series, covering Marcus Aurelius and Jesus. This is going to be a really good episode. I have previewed it, and very much looking forward to sharing this one with you guys. We'll talk a little bit on our last episode. While I get everything running up here, let me get us live on Facebook.
Yeah, sorry.
Oh,
I'm a
good,
little
brother.
bit,
Yeah,
a little bit behind. Let me roll these notes back.
If you want to help me here, we'll start going over a quick review of the Cynics, the Stoics.
Okay. These.
Episode that we just saw, part 14 of the series.
Episode 14. Yep. Alexander the Great.
That was a really good episode, too. It's a little bit challenging, but it's a good one.
So we defined a term, polis, which is city-state, which is a long-term continuity of culture. So it's not just the place. It was just the place. You know, it was the city and the state being the people.
Yes.
That's where we get politics, you know, from the word polis, or at least that's what I've been told and gathered. Could be wrong. And being ostracized is the worst punishment. So at this period of time, we wanted to go. If you wanted to do anything, you go to the polis. You go to the center of people. If you want to go talk in the market and have your back and forth or anything, you go to the center.
Yes.
And to be excluded from that is horrible. But then we have people like Diogenes who would, go out and live in a barrel with the dogs, like out and lowering himself to the lowest standard.
Yes, one of the Cynics.
Yes.
Yeah, that made an art out of shocking people. They really liked that aspect of Plato. But then this guy Zeno comes along, and he also liked Plato's method of dialogos.
And he was less, shock and awe about it. It was more of a
He appreciated the shock and awe, but he also saw that there's more to Plato than just the shock and awe.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, guys, you're doing a good job of bringing about aporia in people, but you're not actually drawing them in to the how they can improve themselves. So give me just 1 second here. I'm going to stop and restart the stream, guys, for like 2 seconds just to make sure that Facebook is running. Okay, let's see what happens. Are we rocking? Yep. Okay, now I can go live on Facebook. Word to Big Bird. What's up, fam?
Hey.
Hello, Facebook fam. This is Actuali Live, Meaning Making 101. Tonight we are covering episode 15 of John Vervaake's Awakening from the Meaning Crisis. Thank you guys for tuning in. We're also live on YouTube and on Twitch. And if you prefer to watch us on YouTube, please do so. We're trying to accrue more listeners here. And make sure you hit that like and subscribe. So we were just talking about the polis.
Yeah, so the polis is the centralized, long-term, the continuous culture in a place. And to be ostracized from that is the worst punishment one can deal with, and we're being drawn in towards that.
And this is the very beginning of a deep identification with culture for people on a civilizational level. So you have wide swaths, wide numbers of people.
I would say it's probably the pinnacle of it, because then what happened is when the Hellenistic age was entered, everything got spread out. You didn't know your neighbors as much. What's a domicide, the destruction of home. You didn't have that home anymore because maybe, just a week ago you were in a totally different place and, you came over by ship, and same with the person next to you.
Yeah, and so everyone had different gods. People are being flung around. There's basically 300 years of turmoil during the Hellenistic era where all people are getting moved around as the empire has spread, and then the empire starts to dissipate and fall apart. But in the process of this, all these different gods and connections were being made, and now we have this sense of domicile, as you said, as the shared religion, shared culture, shared things like that start to become lost. So the feeling of a destruction of home and deep alienation, and they called this the age of anxiety. So the art became less idealistic. It became more realistic. There's more stories of tragedy.
Yeah, and then this is, I guess, the era of the combination of gods, what they call that syncretism,
Yes.
or syncretism,
Syncretism? Yeah,
syncretism.
syncretism.
Yeah, is the smushing,
Integration.
yeah, the
Yeah.
smushing together of a bunch of different gods.
Right.
It's no coincidence that the Romans have basically the same gods that the Greek did. They just have different names and slightly different aspects to them, but they still represent. You get your god of war, you got your father god, you got the siblings of the father god that each have their domains, whether it's the sea or partying or
Yeah, yeah.
and
The god of, what did they call that? Not frivolity, but you said it last episode. Actually, you had the term for it. God of party.
oh yeah, well yeah, like what is it, Dionysus, like merrymaking and wine.
Merrymaking. There you go. That was the term. We did. We had gods for everything. We had gods for the wind and for streams and rivers and lakes and sky and feelings.
Gods
and
for
emotions,
punishment.
Punishment and everything, man.
And so we had a man, Epicurus, who,
Yes.
this quote is his: "Call no man a philosopher who has not alleviated the suffering of others." So that gives us a definition of a philosopher. Is like, what's a philosopher doing? Well, they're attempting to alleviate the suffering of others.
Yes. That's it.
So those are the Epicureans.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And they believe that our main problem was fear, and we're using the term fear as like an anxiety of the nebulous threat opposed to an observable direct threat. So like, you're afraid of the tiger that you see because it's a freaking tiger. We're not talking about that kind of fear. We're talking about the walking through the woods, potentially maybe there's a tiger. You got the anxiety of the tiger, but you haven't yet.
Yeah. Truth.
We suffer because we can't manage our anxiety. So that's the main takeaway from the Epicure. Well, I'm sure there's a lot more main takeaways, but at least the one that stuck with me long enough to.
I like his quote too. He said, "Call no man a philosopher that has not alleviated the suffering of others."
Yeah, so that's
at this point, philosophy is now starting to incorporate the idea of, if you're not healing people, if you're just talking about stuff, you're not of any use.
And so we can't control our imagination. It gets away with us. But perhaps we can, if we're going to be good Epicureans, limit our anxiety and how we feel it. It'd be interesting to go in and see what their practices were, to physiologically get rid of the anxiety too.
Yeah, because they did see philosophers as physicians of the soul that helped heal our existential suffering. And so the Stoics tried to exemplify Socrates. Now we introduce the Stoics.
Real quick before we go on though, the Epicureans. So, and death. You can't pursue immortality. That's just, you can't. But you can radically accept your mortality. You can't be anxious about your own death because you're not anxious about never existing before yourself. That's not a thing. And so when you're dead, basically that's just another then.
Yes. Yes, right. Yeah. It's really about coming to terms with life while we're living it, coming to terms with death, rather than just expecting some immortal afterlife.
It's the loss that we're having the issue with. It's the losing of this life, the losing of...
Regardless of if there is an afterlife or not, the point is, even in the version where you have an afterlife, the point is to live your life well so that you can make it into the afterlife. If there is no afterlife, live your life well, because
there is
no
nothing left. So
I like that. The two different approaches still incorporated that insight.
And so there's a quote here that I like. Where I am, death is not. Where death is, I am not. And that is 100% unfalsifiably true. Because, well, if you are where death is, you're literally not there because you're dead. So you is not there. And
yeah, right.
Flip it around and say it again the other way around. It's still, you're not there because you're dead. The you of your body will be there, but the you that we associate with being us, is not there. The structural functional organization is not there.
There you go.
You are corpse, not human.
Yeah, right.
And
You've
it's
discorporated, my
and
friend.
it's the lack of something that is very hard to define but immediately observable, being alive, being conscious. And we're like, well,
That's a
what is
good point.
consciousness and all that stuff? But you recognize it when it ain't there,
Yeah, you
like
do.
immediately,
Yeah,
like to the point
absent-mindedness.
where like you start to sweat and you have full on responses.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, when someone isn't totally conscious around you, or when you're not feeling totally conscious, you got to go speak in front of the class, and you don't feel ready.
So this definition of the fear of death that we've been working around is only partial. It's really the fear of loss of agency, being that agent in this agent arena world relationship. You're losing your
Yes.
agency. And that's probably why we fear like imprisonment.
Yeah, it's not the
and-
length of time; it's the depth of experience. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, because we don't even like being put into solitary confinement.
Yeah.
Because we're going to be away from other people. We're such social animals. So the Epicureans suggest that we radically accept our mortality.
Yeah.
And be aware of the loss of awareness as what is.
Yeah.
It's not the loss of awareness so much as it is the loss of agency, as you were saying. Yeah. So find what is good.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
That's not just what is pleasurable, but most pleasurable in the sense of what is most meaningful.
Yeah, opposed to like, we tend to say we're if you die, you lose your fame, your fortune, your wealth. But really what's happening is you're losing what is, good.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you're losing your connection to joy.
And so the Epicureans, the last note I have here is friendship gives meaning. That's why we feel the loss of friends so deeply. And so I guess the Epicureans were the first to really, break into the world of, man, woman, crippled, athlete, whatever, where friendships are built between all individuals, and we should strive towards that. Even though we're in an imperfect world, we can strive towards that. Because like previously, they had democracy, but it was only represented by the top landowning
Male aristocrats, basically.
yeah, that are of whatever ethnotype is considered to be the most native to that
Right.
city state. Usually through like family names, family bonds and other stuff, because you can trace those back, and it's like, well, my family's been here longer than your family, therefore I have more say. Which is like, yeah, there's something to that argument, but it's not the whole argument.
Right, right.
So we're, in the Hellenistic era, we have people that are trying to breach these divides between people and really like, almost, I don't want to say atomize, but break down the information and distribute it and build friendship networks that are, in the other definition of the word philosophy, this fraternal joy, but with of discussing these things, but with
The love of
everybody.
wisdom, yeah. Yeah, so it really was a fellowship style of friendship that they were speaking of. That what gives us meaning is friendship in the pursuit of wisdom and self-transcendence together in fellowship.
Yeah.
So that's what the word philosophy means. It's the love, but it's the filial, it's the friendship love of wisdom. Philosophia.
Yeah. So then he briefly brought up the Stoics, and I put godfather of cognitive therapy because we still use certain principles. And so there was Socrates, and then there was Plato, which he was the argumentation type, like always asking questions, going out there and talking with people, and can you argue your point? And then you have the confrontation end, and that's where you get Diogenes. You just confront, the gluing yourself to things and screaming in the streets and stuff. That's if you were to make a god of internal human forces, I guess that would be the same one that possessed Diogenes at this period of time.
Right.
But Antisthenes, man, these names.
I know, right? Yeah.
All I have written is talk to himself.
Oh, yeah. He learned how to internalize Socrates.
Yeah, that's what it was. Yeah.
Socrates' way of conversing within.
Yeah.
And he fine-tuned it. And this was to counteract the crisis of domicide. So to try and create a system of reciprocal opening, just like the Buddha created in the East as the answer to their breakdown, to their axial age. And so, yeah, Socrates' way represents a systematic set of psychotechnologies, which we have learned are things like contemplation, meditation. There's very many psychotechnologies that we as humans have come up with, including language. So they're technologies of the psyche. So a systematic set of these kinds of psychological techniques for reciprocal opening, which means opening onto reality in a way that is reciprocal. What's another word for reciprocal now? I've gotten so used to this word.
Circular, oscillative.
You're in a trade-off.
Back and forth,
dancing, interactive, interinforming. You're informing. So if one person moves a certain way, you shift slightly to maintain and keep hold, or stay with the movements in dance, or
a counterpoint between.
It is. So reciprocal opening.
Yeah. So Diogenes has a quote. I am looking for an honest man, and this is him in the
right.
in the marketplace holding up a lamp. But then he'll go out in that same marketplace and start spanking it. And the point
that was the cynics. They were all about shocking people.
So the point he was making
it's a good point.
With that is there's a difference between disgust and morality. And you may be disgusted with me and would have me feel shame, but you should feel guilty because you have no morals. That's where we get shame and guilt from. Shame is a disgust thing. You feel shame, or you shame people because of things that come from like Vervaeke said, from inside and then come out, like not making your bed or leaving refuse around and other stuff. That's the shame. And guilty is when you have a moral value that you didn't stand up.
Yeah, so shame has violated purity, like purity codes that your society has.
Opposed to moral codes, which is where you get, his point was like, I can be shameful and I can live with the dogs, and I can be crazy, but I cannot find a moral, honest man among you.
Yeah, they were trying to help people see how to set our hearts on what is not man-made, but what is longer term and natural, like the cosmic order, because the things that are invented by man go away, and that will just cause us suffering. These outer things are always temporary.
Yeah.
So live according to the patterns of nature and moral laws, as they put it. So they tried to come up with a distinction between the different moral codes, the purity codes that are designed to keep boundaries and power structures surviving. Power structures that have an interest in defining these purity codes. Sometimes they're useful. Sometimes they're just weird leftovers from an older time.
And also, like, particularly with things like, hygiene things, like not eating certain things or not eating with certain hands and other stuff like that. Like, we have toilet paper and bidet seats now, and we'll use our left hand to eat because our left hand isn't the one that we're removing excrement. But in a lot of cultures, you don't do anything with your left. That's your poop. And it's still that way, even though these cultures are, they have perfect perfectly good bathroom facilities and water.
Plumbing,
But yeah, so the man-made things versus the nature of things, and Alexander the Great came to Diogenes, and he's just laying out there, probably with the dogs, and he's like, if there's anything in the world that I could give you that you would want, like, I'll give it to you. What do you want?
I can give you half the world. Like own this whole planet.
And Diogenes is like, just could you move over to the left a little bit? You're blocking my sun. Which that's very British comedy too. Like actually there might be something.
And so the cynics had some wit and some cleverness to them, but they did not teach the how.
Yeah.
How to actually become a moral exemplar.
Well, because just living with the dog, just living
in their own way.
Yeah, just living with the dogs in the barrel doesn't do anybody any good.
Yeah.
Other than to be a performance artist and kind of.
They were shocking people, and they were trying to get their attention on things that they're like, you're not really being moral. Here you are, all in the market, lying and cheating one another, and you're grossed out by this guy over here spanking it, but. He's not doing anything morally wrong. He's just doing something that is a societal purity violation, which, gross, but still, like, you get the point of what
and
he's
who knows,
saying.
Did he actually do that, or is that just written on the bathroom wall? Did you see what, because they had bathroom graffiti.
So this is where Zeno and the Stoics come in, because Zeno's like, well, I like the Cynics and I like Plato, But the cynics put too much emphasis on the product, on the idea, rather than the process of attachment that we come up with, that we build, and that's something that Buddha got into as well.
And to give the cynics their due, they were right in a sense with, if you set your heart on the wrong thing, you're setting your heart on suffering. So
Absolutely.
It's like, what are you setting your attention, your energy, your heart, your love, your passion on?
Hyper focus on it, and they weren't giving us anything to do after that recognition. So that's where Zeno was like, all right, there's more to this. It is definitely part of our community to be social, and we have to be able to utilize our rationality to recognize the processes of how we can be in higher levels of relation with one another. So he recognized co-identification and the assuming of identities and the assigning of identities that Vervaeke is now speaking of, and the recognition that we are vulnerable to self-deception. All of these things start to come into play, and mainly the idea that we need to meaningfully engage in self-realization and self-transcendence practices. We have to be in the process, in the actual how. We're getting stuck on the event. So we need to be on the how.
Yeah, so maybe the furtherance of the cynics, don't set your heart on the wrong thing, is it's how you set your heart on the thing. It's how you set your heart opposed to what you set your heart on.
Yeah. Yeah, and Vervaeke goes into that deep this episode. And man, this episode is like, I felt like I was getting bodied by Vervaeke at points. I was like, damn, he's good. He's really going deep on this one. I'm feeling called out in some ways, but if you're not feeling called out when you watch this and you're not paying attention, and it's also not in a way that is going to leave you feeling put down. In fact, it's very much just a noticing. It's a recognition, and it's a light onto your awareness, and you're going to be like, oh, shoot, I do that too. But now I'm seeing a way out of that, and that's very uplifting. So ultimately, this is a very inspiring episode. We get to cover Marcus Aurelius, one of the great Stoics and perhaps the greatest emperor that Rome ever had. This was actually one of the good guys. And then we get to go into a little bit about Jesus as well, and Jesus' way. So this is going to be deep.
So my last note on this, and I think this will be a good segue. Set your heart on the process of co-identification, but with mindfulness, lest you muck it up. Pay attention to how we assign and assume identities.
Yes.
Because it is a co-assigning and assuming of things. Even if you're by yourself, you're still in an environment and have to assume things about your environment and assign things about your environment. And, well, it does it with you too. You fall off the rock, now you're food for a scavenging critter. Yep. It has assumed that, well, it assumes nothing. It just assigns you as dead. It is the mountain.
Right. Yeah.
And not the one from Game of Thrones. That was not a copyright thing.
The mountain.
An actual mountain.
That dude was a mountain. All right, fam. Well, we're going to jump on into it. This is episode 15 of Awakening from the Meaning Crisis. If you guys are enjoying this episode, make sure to give John Vervaeke a follow. Links are in the description, and check out this series for yourself. You can actually go into the settings here, and you can change your playback speed so you can catch up with us pretty rapidly. It's comfortable to listen to at like a 1.25, 1.5, even as high as 2 or 1.75 once you get used to it. And if Vervaeke isn't talking particularly fast in that episode, but this is a good way to be able to still at least skim through some of this stuff, and you can rewind as you need. This is a life-changing series, so I'm really excited to welcome you all into joining us in the reviewing and the conversations around this groundbreaking work. So yeah, fam, let's do the thing. Here we go.
Welcome back to Awakening from the Meaning Crisis. So last time up our look at what was going on in Buddhism, and then we moved back to the West, and we started to take a look at what was coming after the Axial Revolution, and we saw that Aristotle's disciple Alexander ushered in a period of turmoil and cultural anxiety, a period where many people were experiencing domicide in a very wide manner, a deep and profound sense of loss of home, not of having a house or a dwelling, but that connectedness, that rootedness to one's culture, one's place, one's history, one's language group, one's religion, one's community, etc. And we saw that what happens is a change in the cultivation of wisdom. Notice again the deep connection between the cultivation of wisdom and the attempt to deal with enhancement of meaning or the response to a meaning crisis. What happens is a change in the notion of wisdom, and that wisdom now takes on a therapeutic dimension in which the philosopher is the physician of the soul and has to learn to cure anxiety. And then we learned how the Epicureans responded to this, how they diagnosed the problem like a physician and prescribed a response. They diagnosed the anxiety of the period of the Hellenistic domicide as being caused by an anxiety about one's own mortality. And we took a look at that, and we took a look at how they responded to that. They advocated giving up, I would argue, the quixotic attempt to achieve immortality, and instead trying to come to an acceptance, a lived acceptance of one's mortality. And they did that by getting you to realize, by slowly getting you to realize, getting clear about your nebulous anxiety, that it's not about non-existence, it's not about experiencing total loss, it's about experiencing partial loss, and then there's a remedy to experiencing partial loss, which is to, set yourself upon those things that are actually constitutive of meaningful happiness, and then deeply realizing and structuring your lives so that you will have those up until the moment of your death, which is philosophically informed friendship, meaningful relationships in which we are afforded the cultivation of wisdom and self-transcendence. Now, while I think mortality salience is definitely a part of the Hellenistic crisis, I don't think the Epicureans have a comprehensive understanding. And to get a more comprehensive understanding and diagnosis, we turn to the Stoics. But in order to understand the Stoics, we have to understand the group that they developed out of. Those were the Cynics. And the Cynics were not as impressed by Socrates' argumentation as Plato was. They were much more impressed by Socrates' capacity for confrontation and provocatively inducing aporia in people. And they started to practice this. And in doing so, they started to force people to realize the distinction between moral codes and purity codes, and to thereby pay more careful attention to what they're actually setting their hearts upon, so that their hearts would not be broken by being set on man-made, impermanent cultural systems and values. Zeno, a Cynic, was deeply impressed by this, but he was also impressed by Plato's argumentation. He wanted to integrate the two together, and he also had the fundamental insight that although particular cultures and historical institutions are contingent, being social is not. We are inherently social in the depths of our humanity. So leaving the polis was not actually an option, according to Zeno. Instead, what we have to do is realize that our issue isn't what we're setting our hearts upon, but how we're setting our hearts. Pay much more attention to the process than the product. So you can see how the Stoics are even picking up on something that's implicit in the Epicureans. The Epicureans aren't trying to change the world and eradicate death by bringing about immortality, the Epicureans are trying to get you to reframe, have an insight, not just an intellectual insight, but an existential insight that changes the meaning of your mortality. And this was the core of the Stoic insight. Pay attention to how that existential meaning is being made. Pay attention to how that process of co-identification, the way we're assuming and assigning identities, is occurring, because that's where your self and your identity and your agency are being forged. The problem is most of us let that process go by mindlessly, automatically, and reactively. And so we mar this process. We make it susceptible to distortion. And that distortion is going to be a distortion that affects the very machinery of our self, of our being in the world. So what did the Stoics advocate that we need to do? Well, we need to bring this process of co-identification, of assuming various roles of our agency, assuming various identities, and assigning various identities in the arena. We need to bring this whole, co-determination, co-creation of agency and arena into our awareness. So they advocated prosos and prokairon. And you're going to see similarities here to what we saw in Buddhism, but also some differences. So prosos is to pay attention. Now, obviously, we're always paying attention, so that's useless advice. What they meant is pay attention to how you're paying attention. Pay attention to how you're judging. Pay attention to this process. Learn to see there's a difference between the meaning, and I mean here the modal meaning, the existential mode you're in. I don't mean semantic meaning. Learn to distinguish between the meaning and the event. Let's stop here. This is the core, I would argue, of all of our current psychotherapies that are cognitive psychotherapies. Learning to distinguish between the event and the meaning you give the event. Because this is happening, this is like when I talked before about your glasses, they're normally transparent. Because we almost always unconsciously framing events, the meaning and the event are fused together. But here's the issue. They're not identical. Events are events. The meaning is the co-identification process that is taking place in response to the event. And that could be a process of parasitic processing that's not intrinsic to the event at all. In fact, the meaning isn't part of the event at all. And this is important, because if you keep them fused, you will be confused. If the meaning and the event are fused, the only way you can alter the meaning is by altering the event. The problem with that is sometimes you can, but here's the thing. Here's the thing that the Stoics are doing, and this is very much like what the Buddha was doing with trying to make you realize how threatened you are. You do not have as much control as you think you do. Epictetus, one of the great Stoic philosophers, starts his manual for living, basically his instruction manual of how to try and live a Stoic life, with saying, the core of wisdom is knowing what's in your control and what's not in your control. And stop pretending that things are in your control that aren't. Because most of the time, we do not exercise as much control over events as we like to believe, and we delude ourselves that we do, precisely because if we lose control of the event, we will, of course, lose control of the meaning because we have fused the meaning and the event together. We are confused, existentially confused. How can such a confusion occur to us? We've already talked about this. I mentioned Erich Fromm when we talked about the being and the having mode. I mentioned at that time, and we would come back to it, that Fromm was directly influenced by the Stoics. It's the Stoics who got us, right, to realize, right, to use Frommian language, the distinction between the having mode and the being mode. The having mode is met by controlling things. And there are some things we literally have to control. Water, food, air, shelter. But most of our most pertinent needs are not needs that are met by exercising control. They are needs that are met by enhancing meaning. We have to become. Look, the being mode is met by developing the agent-arena relationship, by becoming mature, which isn't just something that happens inside of me. Look, when I become mature, it isn't just that I'm changed inside, I also inhabit a different arena. And we recognize that socially. That's why we don't let little kids get married or drive cars or own guns. They're not allowed to move in a certain arena. Maturity is an agent-arena relationship. It is a particular existential meaning. But if you do not know how to separate the meaning from the events, you're liable to be very seriously modally confused, such that you pursue maturity by trying to have a car. You pursue being in love by having sex and controlling and manipulating. But it doesn't work because you really can't exercise as much control over the world as you need in order to stabilize the meaning. Do you see how this is like the cynics still? Right? You're trying to control a world that largely is beyond your control. You're setting your hearts on things, and your heart's going to be broken. But it's not just about man-made things. Anything can fall prey to this. You have to practice bringing into your awareness in a way that is transformative and developmental the distinction between events and the meaning of events, and realizing this. You often act as if you have no control over the meaning because you're ignorant of the processes and it's transparent to you, and you focus on trying to control the event, in which you often have much less control than you realize. This is what you should do. Pull the two apart, the meaning and the event, and recalibrate your sense of control and identity, because you have actually way more control over this than you realize or practice, and you have way less control over this than you realize or practice. That's why the core of wisdom is knowing what's in our control versus what's not in our control. So, how do you practice that? And how does your identity change as you do? Well, the practice is prochiron.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break now to just sum up the beginning there before we get too deep into prochiron. So he was just talking about prososh, right? how we can pay attention to how we pay attention to how we judge. What was the definition he gave that? Did you catch that?
Pay attention to the process, see the difference between meaning mode and the event,
Yes.
or meaning as in the modality of meaning, not the what's the
Like
word?
the existential mode that
yeah,
we're in.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, not the
So the mode of identifying.
semantic meaning, but
Yeah.
the actual meaning.
Yeah, and this becomes the core
and
of
they-
our modern day psychotherapy. If
Yeah.
meaning and event are fused
Fused
together,
together, but they're
then
not
we're
identical.
confused. Yeah.
They're not identical, but they are fused together. But they're fused together in a and like so. The event happens, and we make meaning out of the event. Something happens, and we make meaning out of that. And the fusion of event and meaning locks them together. So, well, if you want to change the event, you have to change the meaning, and that doesn't work. And you have to avoid the confusion of fusing event and meaning together.
Yeah,
And
the problem is that we're confusing the event and and our interpretations of events, the way the meaning of the event strikes us. And those two things are not together. So
Yeah.
we're being confused. We're fusing things together the wrong way in our minds. We're thinking that our meaning of an event is the same as the event itself.
And this goes all the
And
way.
there's definitely a difference between the two things.
And this goes all the way back to the concept that we started discussing episodes and episodes ago of mode confusion. I think it was when we first started talking about Buddhism, modal confusion, confusing the having mode with the being mode, because the
Yes.
having mode is a mode of controlling things.
Yeah.
Like, I have to go get food, I have to get water, I have to gather wood to stay warm, but many of our needs are not met by just this having mode of being. Many of the needs are met by enhancing your relationship with the arena that you're in, enhancing the agent arena relationship.
Yes, yeah, the meaning that we're giving to our experiences. And I like how Epictetus says the core of wisdom is knowing what you're in control of and what you're not. And so stop pretending that you're in control of things that you're not, because we're constantly applying emotional weight to different events in our meaning making and our agent arena confusion. We're misidentifying. We're thinking that the event is the same as our interpretation in our heads. And I've really got to read up on Erich Fromm. To Have or to Be sounds like a really good book. So forgetting the difference between the having mode and the being mode. Having mode is things that we can control, like I'm thirsty. It's important for the body to have a having mode so that I make sure I get water when I'm thirsty, I get food, and the species procreates, and so on and so forth. But there's also a being mode that humans inhabit.
Yeah.
And this is where our existential crises, our suffering, our anxieties, and everything are born out of, is this being mode that is not being met. Because we're trying to become mature through things. We're trying to become mature by buying objects and stuff, and house, car, and everything.
Yeah, you said maturity is a agent arena relationship, and also I put meaning making in here, and it might have just been from Bleed, but I kind of like that as well. Maturity is a meaning making relationship. So
absolutely, yeah. Because when you're in the existential mode of being mode, when you're in your being mode, that's exactly what you're doing. You're making meaning, deep meaning that you can resonate with. That's reliable, and
you don't make a competent driver by giving a 3-year-old a car.
Right, that's confusing the agent arena relationship.
That
agent is not ready for that arena.
Yeah, and
that's why we have that separation in society. Kids are not ready to drive until a certain
and the
age.
same thing. Whereas, boys do it. They start wearing Axe body spray. At least when I was a young man, and the girls wear certain makeups and stuff to do having mode maturity.
Yes, and the problem there is the modal confusion that we're getting ourselves into. We're trying to fulfill being mode needs,
but I feel like
being
an
in
adult,
love.
But you've never been an adult.
Yeah, but having a fulfilling relationship.
Yeah,
we're having sex oftentimes nowadays to try and fulfill that deep being mode need, but we're trying to fulfill the being mode with a having mode orientation. Having sex is not going to
making love.
It's not making love in a long-term relationship.
Well, it's having versus making, and making is a being. You're making something. I think you mentioned this in a previous episode, but it stuck out to me. The difference between having sex and making love. being in a relationship before opposed to dating.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm going on a date. I have a date tonight. Oh, okay.
Yeah, we think we're so mature nowadays in the way that we're approaching relationships, but I don't know. I don't know, guys.
If it works for you and you truly feel like it does, good on you.
Right.
But there is something to be said about, holding out and finding somebody that makes you feel like what Tom McDonald said, makes you feel like you, makes me feel like me.
Yeah.
That other piece. And it's worth looking for, and I don't mean like, just jumping on Tinder or other dating apps and looking in that way, but being open and mindful for that to be there. Because, the world works and the universe works in mysterious ways. And if your eyes aren't wide enough open, you won't even see it when it's there. Right. And that's old grandma knowledge. They're telling you this stuff.
Yeah. But we hunger for this. I like that you brought Tom McDonald up, that line in that song. Yeah. I want to be with you because I'm me with you.
Yeah.
That's cool. That's a great line. I love that.
But yeah, that's
and that song is popping off because people are feeling it, young and old.
Well, and
it's been a long time since we've had a good love song that's become a major hit.
But it used to be it used to be nothing but love songs, and I got fed up with them.
Nothing to do with sex. This is all about love and appreciation.
But yeah,
that was cultivated in a partnership that they built together and worked hard together on. So that's a different game.
Yeah.
So we must practice bringing into awareness the distinctions between the event and the events and the meaning that we give them. Or otherwise, we are going to be in modal confusion. We are fusing things together in an improper way that causes us to be confused. So that's where we get that deep sense of nihilism, or where nihilism comes from. We get the deep sense of meaningless, the deep sense of aporia, of domicide, of not feeling at home.
Yeah. And ultimately, you have more control of how you make meanings of things than you do on an event. It's like, the bubble kid. The parents trying to prevent them from getting hurt, but so they put them in this hermetically sealed, house with all the hand sanitizer. And there was a movie about it, but I
remember
think
that
he
old
had
movie,
something. But basically, like, you could see this, like, the kid that's over sterilized, and parents don't want him to get sick and all that stuff. That's the sick kid. That's the kid that's always getting sick.
Yeah.
And so you're just trying to control event. I don't want kid to get sick. Whereas, well, okay, what's the meaning of a kid being a little grubby creature that picks up all the dirt, and why do they got to go through
the answer to my fear is to have a deep relationship with that person, with that kid, while I can. Every moment, let's make it as deep and as beautiful and as meaningful as possible. Of course, still protect them as well as we can, but not in such a hyper extreme way that we're disallowing them to have a deep sense of meaning and getting to experience their being mode with us.
Yeah, actually, like, if we're to get, like,
because if it's the life that matters, we want to have that meaningfulness together.
So
deeply fulfilling meaningfulness.
Not to get archetypical.
Not just having you alive.
Not to get archetypical on you, but this is what I guess would be referred to as the devouring mother. You don't let your kid go out into the world because it's sacrificing the most important thing to you out into the world. And so you cloister them in, but they don't develop properly because part of the mother-child relationship is sacrificing that little booger out into the world, let him go play out and scuff up their knees and do all that stuff. And then you just end up devouring them and consuming them. So archetypically speking, we'd call this the devouring mother.
Yeah, the kid never learns to be independent on its own.
Yeah, and the other end would be the tyrannical father, which is, just like, you need to learn some respect, but, beats the crap out of the kid, and that's not respectful at all.
There's never any follow-up wisdom or anything. He just tells them all that he's doing wrong.
So you can go
tell him how.
And those are all confusions of not being in the having mode, the making meaning, not being in the being mode, being in the having mode. So there's not much control you can have over this event. And you can, like, sometimes you can't have water because you're in the middle of the freaking desert.
Yeah.
And
so the whole point here seems to be find the meaning within.
Yeah. Yeah.
Regardless of what's happening in the world, regardless of events, we don't have to be so easily swayed by the events that surround us. Someone smashes into your car, that could make for a really bad day, a really bad week. But you don't have to operate on that level psychologically with it. You can just notice, okay, that's what happened. Oh, there's my having mode being interrupted. I can see how my physiology is responding to this. I can feel the anxiety coming up in my body. But you can reframe the situation for yourself too. You can re-identify that having mode, or I'm sorry, that agent arena relationship, and say, well, this is kind of what happens in life. I'm glad that I'm okay. I'm not dead. It could be worse. The other person could have been hurt. They're not either. Blah, blah, blah. All is well.
Mm-hmm.
Everything will work out. I'll just do what I got to do to put the pieces back together now. And you take the emotional weight and baggage out of that event. You de-emotionalize it, and you bring meaning. Because we're getting our meaning from within rather than from what's happening outside of us.
And I can understand why this idea that and practices of helping people understand the difference between the meaning of it and the event would help, with like trauma therapies, whether, it's, like your PTSD wartime stuff, or your rapes, or your parent died, or friend committed suicide, or these things that like they're events based but are very profound, and like you can get stewed up in the well, if I only just picked up my phone, maybe I could have kept him from killing himself. It's like, well, there's nothing you can do about that event that happened, but the meaning is something you can do. So the event, yes, happened, tragic or horrible as it was. The only way to move through is to separate the event from the meaning, so you can actually put your time and energy into that meaning.
Don't just beat yourself up over that, and make yourself feel miserable. Yeah. You can take what you've learned from that experience and recognize, well, shoot up, I'm only human. This is my first time through, as far as I know. I'm sure other people have made this mistake. I'm not proud of it, but I'm going to do a much better job of being there for my friends from now on. Mm-hmm. And you can deepen your life again, and then you can bring a lot more value to your friends, your families, and your own life that way. And you really can not maybe make up, but in a sense you can make up for that event in a way, and by honoring what you realized you were missing. Doing the work now. We're all works in progress here. We can't beat ourselves up so much.
Yeah, it doesn't do anything, and
no, it doesn't. Yeah, it's
I'm
it's
kind
like
of
we're recapitulating like something that someone did to us.
It's not necessarily like easy to detach the two, particularly as far as event and the meaning, particularly when it is things that have so much emotional weight, because when we are emotional, we're not as logical. And that's where getting into the practice of something, because if you practice it regularly, it becomes just a repetitive thing that you can do.
Yeah, it becomes internalized.
Like the stereotypical soldier that has field stripped his rifle 1.5 million freaking times, that could just and go to sleep. It's like that. Or the kung fu guy that can do the perfect routine and end it with like the weird staff standing thing for the right amount of time, and then come down gracefully.
Oh, sure.
And do it repeatedly.
And then you can take those moves into a fight and do them on the fly.
With kung fu, not so much, but you can take the lessons learned while doing this and how your body works. Like, look at parkour. You're taking basic movements, practicing them over and over and over again, and now you can fly. You can freaking fly. Like, I see these kids doing this, and I'm just like, you're flying.
But you're learning to respond to an event naturally in a state of flow.
But it's practice and practice and practice. I'm a musician.
It has to be internalized so that it become an automatic response. Yeah. So we have to rehabitualize ourselves, essentially. Yeah. Rehabitualize our psychology.
And that word practice is important, because it's not like when somebody says, oh, like a doctor, my practice. The reason why they call it is because that's where you do. That's where you continually do, and you keep up and you get better. Or like say a religious practice. It's something you're doing.
Yes, it's not going
until it becomes automatic within you. Like the ideal of the good Christian is to not say the words just on Sunday.
Mm-hmm. Not to virtue signal it, but to be it. But to live it.
But to keep doing it so much so that when you do get in the offender bender, instead of just losing your crap and cussing them out, you just
Or when the temptation does come, you recognize
Are you all right?
it for what it is. Yes.
Yes.
It's a tricky game, but we get plenty of opportunities.
We've got plenty of time to practice
cultivate our capacities here.
Our lives are just short enough that we can feel the value and the drive, but long enough where we can really gain deep insights.
Like that, true. Yeah.
I wouldn't want to be an elf that lives for like thousands and thousands and thousands. What does that do to you?
No, and we get a proposition here in this episode too, which is going to be interesting. It's really cool.
Is that the Methuselah men? The ancient?
You'll see if you haven't seen this episode yet. You'll see.
The idea of
we're going to play with that idea.
The idea of being a Methuselah person,
being immortal.
Yeah, this actually is coming up because, we're always looking for the new thing that'll make you live longer and longer and longer. And I think it was on Timcast, but they're like, you know, if you could take this pill or whatever and it would just keep you perfectly healthy and live, like, would you do it? And the point was brought up, well, and Ian brought this up, well, you can just get done with it and kill yourself. But really the big point they're making was, what kind of then rights does somebody who lives forever have? Because they're going to have to jump on everything. My argument is they're no longer going to be human once you live that long. The other thing is, I'm not doing it. I want my lifespan to be within about 100 years, give or take 40. Well, give or take 40, on the top side or the bottom side. Any longer, I don't, you're not human anymore. And also, where's the spice of life but the urgency of death? That's where the flavor of life comes from.
A rose is only beautiful because it dies.
Yeah, right.
It doesn't last forever.
I've seen some really convincing
it's a very special
plastic
thing that's temporary.
I've seen some really convincing plastic flowers that look beautiful, but then once you realize they're plastic, you're just like,
oh, loses the charm, doesn't
it?
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
You come up, you feel the petal, and it's plastic, and you're just like, oh shit, that's not. Yeah, okay, whatever.
Yep. Feel that.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, let's jump back in here into John Vervaeke's Awakening of the Meaning Crisis. Yeah, Pro-Chiron.
This means sort of ready to hand. It means remembering, but in the sense of sati, like mindfulness. It means remembering in a way that brings skills and sensitivities and sensibilities to bear in an appropriate and effective manner. It means remembering in a modally existential sense. So you practice a bunch of psychotechnologies to try and get them so internalized that you can not know that there's a distinction. I know that I should go outside the 9 dots, but I need to know how to actually separate these things. So, what do? Well, you engage in moment-to-moment practices. You can see this. A book where you can see somebody doing this. And the book has to be read properly because many people misread the book. This is the Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. People read this book and they often think the point of the book is to believe the propositions he is proposing. The book is not written to you. It is not an attempt to create beliefs in you. Therefore, using it as creating beliefs is mistaken. The book is written to whom? The book is written to himself. Marcus Aurelius is practicing what Pierre Hadot called spiritual exercises. He is practicing psychotechnologies that are attempting to bring into awareness the co-identification process and co-transform the meaning of the world and the meaning of himself as distinct from attempting to control and manipulate the world by accruing power and fame. And this was a particularly difficult problem for Marcus Aurelius, precisely because he had power and fame. He was the emperor. Many people consider him, I do as well, the greatest of the Roman emperors. He was the Roman Empire when it was still in ascendance. Generally, he's considered the last great emperor of that ascendance, and the beginning of the decline is marked when his son assumes the throne. The movie, while in many ways a fine movie, Gladiator, does not represent Marcus Aurelius well at all. Marcus Aurelius said something that really brings out both of these points. The challenge he faced and not getting enmeshed in power and fame because of the way power and fame fuse the meaning with the event. He famously said this: "It is possible to be happy even in a palace." And now you can think of the Buddha leaving the palace. Marcus Aurelius, unlike the Buddha, unlike the cynics, doesn't leave the palace. He learns how to be happy even in a palace, because he does not want to shirk his moral responsibilities. So what are some of these practices you see him engaging in? One is a practice that Hadot calls objective seeing. I'm not quite happy with that term because of some of the associations with the word objective, but let us go on. Aurelius says, conceive of sex as the friction of two patches of skin and the production of a sticky fluid. And you go, ew, that's kind of like Diogenes in the marketplace. It's ew. Well, what's he doing there? What's he doing, and why is he doing it? He's married, he has children, so he's not a prude. Right? In fact, he loved his wife quite deeply. What's he doing? He's trying to get you to realize the event of sex as distinct from all of the meaning we pour into it. The event is friction between some patches of skin and the production of a sticky fluid. But we pour all of this into it. And there's all of this meaning. And he's not saying that meaning's wrong. That's not the point, any more than the being mode is good and the having mode is bad. He's not saying that. He's getting himself to realize, to enact, wait, there's a difference between the event and all of this meaning that I'm identifying with. All of this rules I'm assuming, all of the rules I'm assigning. Right? The Stoics would recommend get a cup that you're really attached to, a cup you really like. Start using it on a daily basis so that you really like it until it becomes very familiar, and then smash it. Because then you'll remember the distinction between the meaning and the thing. And if you can practice it with something that ultimately isn't that much of an event, with little things, then you can learn to do it with larger things. This leads to a practice that many people find distasteful for the Stoics. It's called premeditatio. When you're kissing your child goodnight, say to yourself, I may lose them to death tonight. Because you have to learn to distinguish the meaning from the physics. You have tremendous control over the meaning that you and your son are making together. You have very little control over the physics of his mortality. Yes, you can do things to protect him, and you should, but you can't move the universe. Look, we have got to remember this better, sati. We have entire genres that distort and refuse together the meaning and the event. They are pervasive in our culture, and I think they're much more pernicious than we realize. The ubiquitous evil is always the most dangerous, right? These are romantic comedies. Because romantic comedies teach us that the narrative meaning we are assigning to things is aligned with, consonant with, in concert with the way the world is unfolding. So events will conspire to bring two people together. There will be difficulties, but the world will help them to realize until they finally end up together. Now, of course, we have tragedies to try and compensate that, but the romantic comedy teaches us the wrong. That's not how it works. I'm in love with an amazing woman. I admire her I admire her as a person. I'm just so deeply grateful to be in this relationship, and it's growing and growing. Right? And I'm, oh, this is fantastic. And I step out into the street and I don't notice a truck coming and it kills me. It doesn't care about my happiness. It doesn't care about my narrative. It doesn't care about all of that meaning that I'm making with her. It's real that we're making this meaning. It's part of our being mode. But it's not the same as the events that I'm experiencing. See, this leads to the Stoics' diagnosis. It's not mortality that makes us anxious, it's fatality. Now, here's another instance, and this I would recommend Weiser's book, Beyond Fate, where we've lost the meaning of a word. Because we associate that with mortality. Something that's fatal is something that has caused death. But that's not the root of the... Death is not the root of this word. The root of this word is fate. Now, there's two meanings to this. One is some sort of magical things are predestined by some supernatural force. I'm not talking about that meaning of fate. I'm talking about the way things are are fated to happen. They're just rolling from their own causal necessity. And here's the point. When we fuse these together, we become subject to the fatality of all things. Everything is fatal in that the meaning and the thing are not identical, and if we forget that, we will suffer when they come apart. Now I can explain to you the association. Why is this associated with death? Because death is where those come apart. Death is where the events of the universe and all of your meaning and all of your narrative and all of your identity radically become unglued. Death is fatal. It reveals to you in the ultimate loss of agency that meaning and event are not identical. What's another practice that the Stoics engage in? Practice they engaged in is called the view from above. The view from above. You can see Marcus Aurelius doing it in the Meditations. He says, imagine that instead of, and think about the Solomon effect that we talked about, moving from a first-person perspective to a third-person perspective. And there's all kinds of evidence about altering your level of construal having these very powerful effects on your cognition and your sense of self. And so you're viewing some situation and you're enmeshed in it. Now view it higher up in space and time, and then higher up still in space. So not just here, but situate this event. Situate this event within all of Toronto. Oh, no, situate it within all of Canada, within the whole world, within not just the whole world now, but the whole world through all of time. What happens when you do that? Don't just say it, try it sometime. Visualize it, imagine yourself doing it. What happens is the agent arena is being altered, and all of this machinery is coming into your awareness, and your sense of self and your sense of what matters and what's important, what things mean, is being radically transformed. You'll become more liable to pursuing more long-term goals. You'll become more flexible. You become more capable of rational reflection, self-transformation. This is all evidenced from construal level theory. See, a bunch of practices that are designed to get you to bring into awareness this process of meaning making and to give you the discernment to pull apart the meaning from the event. Most therapy is about getting people to see this. Perspectival change. Perspectival knowing. And then to identify with it. Change their sense of self, their sense of control, so that they move off trying to so much change the events that they can't control as much as they deeply, desperately want to cognitively reframing the meaning. And again, this isn't just semantic meaning. This is the identity, your participatory meaning, your existential mode.
All right, we're back.
Alrighty.
That was a lot of notes really fast.
Yeah.
Okay.
My wrist hurts.
So we got into prochiron now, which is remembering in a way that is like bringing our skills and sensibilities together. It's a sati kind of remembering.
He used the term or the phrase "ready to hand."
Yeah, ready
and
at hand.
I don't think so. I don't think that means like ready to hand you, but ready at hand.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. So skills, sensibilities, ways of approaching. But because we can know, but we need to know how something is affecting us.
Yeah. So Marcus Aurelius's book Meditations is not a how-to or self-help manual.
Like his journal.
It's his own reflections. It's a set of psychotechnologies that he is practicing to garner more meaning and understanding in life, and to be able to.
He wanted to get in a better reciprocal relation with the world. And so he was doing these practices that helped him develop meaning of self through being mode rather than having mode, because he wanted to influence most effectively. He really loved his people. He really wanted to influence them with wisdom and a way of being rather than through his fame and his power. And he had all the fame and the power, so the temptation was there.
And I like that quote, "It is possible to be happy even in a palace."
What a crazy thing to say for somebody.
If you do have,
awesome.
like, you know, if you are, if you're,
because you get numb to everything, right?
Yeah. Well, so if you're a person that has like high notability and high responsibility, and you want to get meaning, and you're just like, well, I just got to dip out and disappear. Well, then you're neglecting your responsibility.
Yeah.
You know, what would that be? You're neglecting your Dharma, essentially.
Yeah.
So you can't just dip out.
Yeah.
So he's like, okay, well, how do you live in the palace and still maintain or still enhance the being mode?
Yeah. How do I still generate meaning in this place? Because there's so many superficial ways that I can feel pleasure. I can feel good temporarily, but none of these things are lasting. And I need something through which I can rule effectively, not just through my power or the sway of my personality and my fame and position, which is really insightful for somebody in that position. Yeah, he doesn't want to shirk his responsibility to his empire. And so he does this crazy experiment where he is trying to conceive of sex and separating the event of what's happening from the meaning that we give it.
It's called objective seeing. It's practice
so at least
one.
attempted objective seeing might be what Vervaeke would prefer, because he doesn't like the term objective.
Well, and also it's not objective, like, you know, we
don't know if it's truly objective.
You're not outside the system. Like,
we're going for objective though.
So objective less of being outside the system and more of removing the meaning component to things. So in sex, it's just friction that creates a climax response, and then causes one to and then there's just a lot of sticky goo everywhere.
It's the same thing when we're trying to find pleasure and happiness and joy and meaning in things outside of us. Well, and we feel existential confusion. So this is why we get into these existential crises of suffering. So we must separate the meaning that we're attaching to meanings and the events that are actually happening.
And the importance of this first practice, and you should do it too. Sex was just an example, but you know,
I like the cup example.
Yeah, so
That's a good practice.
It creates a distinction between the event and meaning by just showing just contemplating the event itself in its grossest form, and I don't mean gross as an ick.
No, but just
but gross, just
cause and effect physics.
It is what it is. It's this amount of this happening here.
Yeah. So I like the suggestion. Use a cup a lot and get to like it a lot, and then break it.
Yeah.
And then notice, okay, that feeling of loss that you're having inside you is because you attached meaning to that cup. And so the process of meditatio, this was really beautiful.
Meditatio, that's what it is. Okay.
When you're kissing your child goodnight, realize that he could die tonight.
Yeah.
So you recognize we have great control over our meaning, the meaning that we give things. We don't have control over the events, but we actually do have control over our meaning. And we can give
what's that
events all kinds of crazy meanings that are unnecessary, but we can also give them very deep.
What's that nursery rhyme we tell our kids? Now I lay me down to sleep, I pray the Lord my soul to keep, and if I die before I wake, I pray the Lord my soul to take.
Because we have great control over our meaning that we apply to things, little over the physics and what happens in actual reality. And so we have to remember better. We have to get more into that sati mode of being.
And rom-coms are apparently the devil. Now
Yes.
I won't put those words in his mouth, but and he's right too. So the point of a romantic comedy is to have this narrative running where it's two people in the same big city, and everything seems to be pushing them together.
Is just to give you.
But it doesn't work like that. The world doesn't care.
Yeah, it's just supposed to be fun.
Care.
It's supposed to give you the feeling of being happy.
Yeah, the world didn't put you guys together.
Yeah, but it's not really giving you good advice on relationships at all.
Because really, like at the end of the day, the world, happy or sad event, it does not care. It just does.
Yeah, these movies are very idealized.
So it's the Stoics. It's not the anxiety of mortality, but fatality.
Yes,
as in fate.
Yeah, not our mortality that makes us anxious, but our fatality, the actual fact that we die.
Yeah.
Fate is the root of the word fatality.
And that there is
fatality, not fatal.
The fate of the world that doesn't care, that's going to continue and churn and do its thing, regardless of what you want. Yeah,
and this makes sense. Fatal comes from fate.
Yes,
fatality
exactly.
comes from fate.
Yeah.
So when we're joining things together, fusing things together, the event and meanings that we attach to them, we suffer. And to pull them apart,
well, we are subject to fate.
We are subject to fate. So, and death is the ultimate coming apart.
Yeah.
It's the ultimate loss of agency. So one way of handling this existential crisis within ourselves is to take a view from above. I don't know where I ever got this, but I've been doing this for a long time. Yeah, it's really helpful.
Zoom out and you zoom out and you zoom out. You imagine yourself in your house, and then your house on the street, and then the street within the town. And
just recognize the reality that I'm in. So if I'm personally depressed, something really sad is happening in my personal life at that moment, or in the wider world that's deeply concerning, then I'll remember, oh, that's right. We're in the midst of evolution on a living planet, soaring through space.
Yeah.
In the midst of this infinite vastness that nobody has an explanation for, and what a wonder that it is that we are all here doing this.
What's that Tool song with the lyrics, spiral out, keep going, spiral out?
Is that Parabola?
I think that might be Parabola.
I'm horrible with song names.
That's that viewing from above, that's spiraling out, going out, getting higher. And this viewing from above also allows you to see the machine. So putting yourself in an ever-expanding third-person perspective allows you to see then the machinery of your own cognition, and how you're, not just the agent-event arena, but how you deal with said arena, and then how those things work. And then always, you have these two, so it's you and something else, and now it's those two things and you. But then you see you again as three things, and then back, and you can start to see not just the doer doing the thing, but why the doer does the thing, and why does that work, and what are the things that make up the thing that the doer is doing that allows them to do the thing.
It's 46 and 2, I think.
46
I think it's the one that they did in Solfeggio.
46 and 2 are ahead of
Black
me.
and white
are all I see in my infancy. Red and yellow then came to be, reaching out to me. Let me see. Yeah, the Fibonacci. And as above, so below and beyond, I imagine, gone beyond the lines of reason, Push the envelope. Watch it bend. Yeah.
Good song, man.
If you can't tell, we're fans of Tool.
They were definitely trying to tap into that meaning mode
yeah,
and help
man.
share it with people. Still are, man. Good work, dude.
So this expanding
work.
up enhances your sense of self and what matters. But like you're gaining more, and also looking at the self as the sticky ball that sticks other things and is the primary relationship haver and creator. You can see all the things that are sticking to you and then how it sticks to you and what's, all the different relationships that make up yourself, your relationships with others, as well as this arena that we're in, that is life.
Yeah.
Just further out and further out. And then you realize you get the small ball effect where you're like, oh man, we're fleas on a flea, but the flea's on a flea that's on a flea.
Yeah,
it's
right.
on a flea that's fleeing through space. On the back of
on the
back of an elephant, 3 elephants floating through space on a sea turtle,
and turtles on top of turtles all the way down.
All right, so I think we're about.
I love that, man. Yeah, that's the overview effect too that astronauts get. Also, when you take that step back and you keep taking that step back, you get that telescopic view of reality as though you're looking
view from
at
above,
Earth from the
overview.
cosmos. That overview. Yeah. You also get the sense of oneness. You realize, oh, that's right. This is just this one living planet. I'm an outgrowth of it, as so is everyone else. We're all misidentified as thinking we're totally separate beings, but actually we're independently aware extensions of one thing.
Yeah.
The cosmos, this planet, it just keeps on fractaling itself out.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So that's the end of my notes for this part. We're at the midway mark.
Yeah, we are. It's a good time for a break, guys. So if you want to go ahead and hit the bathroom, grab yourself a drink, pop some corn, do what you got to do. We're going to be back in like 10 minutes-ish.
If it's a little bit longer, it's only because I got some chicken and rice and stuff.
Yeah, but feel free. Keep the Zoom running, the stream running, Zoom running. Keep the stream running. And
keep on zooming.
We will see you guys in just a moment. We're back.
Hey. Got some chicken and rice.
Yes, we do. We got some eats. We're going to grub while we continue to watch this episode. And you guys are welcome to grub down with us. Anything else you want to say before we jump back in, or should we just get right back into it?
No, I think we're good.
All right. I hope you're all here. We're jumping back in now. Let's do this then. John Vervaeke's Awakening from the Meaning Crisis. Make sure to like and subscribe if you're enjoying the show, and make sure to look up John Vervaeke and drop him some likes and subscribe to him as well. Let's roll.
And this takes tremendous practice. The last thing you'll see Marcus Aurelius doing, and even more Epictetus, is the practice of actually internalizing Socrates, like Antisthenes talked about at the very beginning of this whole tradition. It means trying to do with yourself what Socrates had done with you. You can see this again in modern cognitive behavioral practices. You get people to stop and be Socratic with themselves. So the person is depressed. Remember I said when Antisthenes was talking about conversing with himself, he wasn't talking about the way you ruminate. Because when we ruminate, we're running things through our head. Like, everything I do is a failure. The therapist doesn't try and console the person and says, like, well, no, go out and get more success. He doesn't give the American commercial response. Well, go out and succeed more, conquer the world. Good luck with that. Okay? He says, well, she says, everything you do? Everything? Was you stating to me that that's a failure, itself a failure? Well, no, not everything. Did you get here successfully today? Well, yes, I did. What about clothing yourself? Oh, yes. So what do you mean by everything? I don't mean everything. What do you mean? Okay? And you realize a lot of this is because I'm letting this go by without having my own internal Socrates that stops me and says, oh wow, you're making such powerful claims. You must know and understand. But you see, you're bullshitting yourself because this is very salient to you, but it's way beyond your understanding because it's not representing what you actually mean. This may be what you believe, but it can't be what you mean. Everybody hates me. Everybody? So everybody's out to get you. Well, no, not most people. Which people? Well, this person. They hate you? How do you know they hate you? Well, they said that. Is that enough for hate? You can see Socrates here. Is that what you mean by hate? Tell me what you mean by it. You've got all these things salient in your mind and you're running them round and round and round, but you don't really understand the meaning. And you're bullshitting yourself. Your motivation and your arousal is way ahead of your understanding. And most importantly, because of that, the meaning and the event are confused together. And again, this is not just in your beliefs, this is in your very identity. By doing all of this, you're going to transform your capacity for interacting with the world. You're going to not fall prey to the absurdity, and we're going to come back to absurdity again, right? That's inflicted on you by the fatality of all things. Because if you can discern, and this is one of the key things of wisdom, is discerning, not just in thought, but in perspective and in identity, the difference between the meaning and the events, and properly identify, by meaning properly sensing and calibrating your sense of control, then you will alter your sense of identity. How? And how could this possibly give an answer to the mortality of things that the Epicureans gave a direct answer to? Well, let's play with that a little bit. A bit of a view from above. Let's say I gave you immortality. You got it. What would you do with it? Well, I do all the things I'd like to do. Okay, great. What would you do? Well, I'd have lots of sex and eat lots of chocolate. Okay, how long? Well, probably not very long. I'd get bored. Then what would we do? Well, I'd pursue more meaningful things. Well, what? Like I've always wanted to learn archery. I'd take up archery, and then then I'd get really good at archery. Great. Then what? Well, really good at basketball. Yeah, and then what? Really good at... There's a really good story by, it's a chapter in a book, The History of the World in 9.5 Chapters by Julian Barnes, where people go to heaven, and what they're doing in heaven is they're given what they think is immortality, and this is one guy, he practices golf until he's getting a score of 18, right? And then he's sort of like, okay, what do I do now? What do I do? And then he comes to sort of St. Peter and he says, like, what's going on? And he says, what's wrong? Aren't you doing everything you want? I am, but I get great at everything. And then St. Peter says, well, yeah, so what? He says, well, I'm kind of done. And then St. Peter says, now you get the point of heaven. The point of heaven isn't to live out immortality, it is to make you accept death. Now, that's not classic Christian doctrine by any means. It's a great story. And it epitomizes the Stoic idea. As long as you are formulating your identity horizontally in terms of a narrative of achieving an unending duration to your life, you're going to fail. But even if I gave it to you, and this is what people need to stop and think about, it would fail. What you want is that moment that guy in heaven has. Right? You want not a length of life, but a fullness, a depth. You want to have lived life as fully as possible. This is why Marcus Aurelius says, everybody dies, but not everybody has lived. People quote that, and they think it's about sort of gusto or something like this. Right? That's not what it's meant. This is the access of fame and fortune, the having mode. There's nothing wrong with it. But this is the access of self-transcendence, the being mode. What do you identify with? Is your identity here? Or do you identify here? And if you identify here and you practice pro-chiron and pro-sosh, you can get this fullness of being. Remember, that's what Plato promised. You could come to a complete fullness. And even if it lasts a moment, that's enough. Because it's not based on duration, it's based on quality. If I can achieve that in this moment, right here, right now, then I'm done. Then I'm done. So the Stoics have an answer that in a somewhat watered-down form is still very powerfully effective, at least in our therapeutic endeavors, which are becoming more and more central to many people's lives because of the meaning crisis. But a less watered-down version is also existentially pertinent and relevant. We can come to realize that I can exercise much more control over the meaning-making, such that I get the one thing that is always good to have, which is wisdom, that can afford me an identity in the depths, an ontological identity, rather than a merely historical identity. And that would be a fulfilled life. And that is actually what I want. I'll speak personally now for a moment. I mean, at a physiological level, of course, I avoid death. I don't step into traffic, and I'm enjoying my life. So I don't mean this in any morbid or depressive way, but I do not want to live forever. Right? I do not want to live forever. I do not think that John Vervaeke should exist for all time. I think that would be an ontological mistake of astronomical proportions. In some ways, I'm tired of life. I'm tired of the ways in which I've been foolish, the ways I've been immoral, let myself and other people down. And I have a strong sense of the inevitability of that. And extending that through all of eternity strikes me as a horrible evil to inflict on reality. And that one I myself do not want to bear. But have I seen glimpses of this? Yes, I have. And we know from when people have awakening experiences that give them this, that they lose their fear of their mortality. They lose that existential anxiety. And if that's coupled to a fullness of being, that would be a way of responding to not only our mental health issues, but our existential distress about our own individual mortality. So you can see with both the Epicureans and the Stoics that we have things analogous, different but analogous to the kinds of things we saw at work within Buddhism. And we can see that the West is building up this very powerful tradition in its own right. And one of the great things about Pierre Hadot's work, and I recommend it very strongly to you, like what is ancient philosophy, or philosophy as a way of life, is to remind us that we do not have to look to Asian history, Asian, not ancient. We do not have to look to the East for the psychotechnologies of self-transcendence and self-transformation. There's no reason not to. We should. But we should not do that because we believe there is nothing within the Western heritage that offers us a profound response to the quest for meaning, wisdom, self-transcendence, and a response to existential anxiety. We have those things. Now, one of the things that has been happening, and I think it is a good thing, although it is indicative of the increase of the meaning crisis in the West, is there has been a rediscovery of Stoicism, Platonism, etc. Part of what we need to do, and that's what I've been trying to do with you, is integrate that with our current cognitive science so that once again we can learn how to, and I mean this in a deeply, spiritually deep way, salvage from our own tradition the psychotechnologies and practices of wisdom and meaning making that we are going to need, but in a way that we can live within a scientific worldview. So, the Hellenistic period comes to an end with the advent of a return to a world empire, which in very many ways, right, is going to be informed by the axial revolution, but in very many ways also represents a return to a pre-axial world. Namely, a world in which eventually a man can be considered a god because he wields so much power, the Roman emperors. And power and prosperity are the primary ways in which wisdom is understood. But within that empire, all of these philosophies will find home, and eventually, as we noted with Marcus Aurelius, even the emperor himself will be a proponent and an exemplar of the legacy of the axial revolution. But something else is also happening with the advent of this empire in the Mediterranean, and we return back now, as I promised we would, to one of the areas in which the axial revolution had taken place, and this, of course, is ancient Israel. Because what's happening is, of course, Israel is now been conquered by a sequence of empires, and the most recent, of course, is the Roman Empire. And I want to now speak of a religion that emerges at this time. It's not an axial religion, but it is deeply informed by the axial legacy, particularly the ancient Israel legacy, where the two worlds were understood, if you remember, in terms of moving from the land of slavery to the promised land, where the real world is the future and God is this open creator. And
all right, guys, we're going to break here before we move into ancient Israel and talk on Jesus Christos.
Oh, hold on. I've had
we've just been scarfing down chicken and rice.
So the next step, the next practice after the objectification, then the what was it?
Internalizing Socrates.
Yeah, so we did, okay.
Yep,
it was objective seeing, premeditation, then, oh boy.
Yeah, romantic comedy, view from above.
Yeah.
Now we get on to how we can internalize Socrates, like Epictetus, was it?
Yeah, that, if I can find it in the notes, that sounds about right.
Doesn't matter. The point is, the idea of doing with oneself with what Socrates tried to do with people.
Yeah.
So not to ruminate or think fatalistically, but to observe our thinking. This is very similar to Buddha's approach.
And to be able to have that back and forth practice, but within yourself, not the back and forth like, you suck. Oh, I know I suck. Yeah, you definitely suck. Yeah, you just failed at that, not that. And he mentioned, like a counselor wouldn't be like, oh, okay, yeah, you suck, and how'd you fail? And you failed like this, and then you failed like that, and failed like that. The counselor is going to ask, it's like, well, what do you mean everybody hates you?
Yeah.
You believe that everybody hates you, but what do you mean? Like everybody?
Yeah, what do you mean by everybody?
Like, I don't hate you. I'm pretty sure my secretary doesn't hate you.
Yeah.
That person hates me. It's like, so what do you mean opposed to what you believe?
Because what we're feeling is super salient to us, and we're trying to describe the impact of something with that exaggeration that we're using. Yeah. So we can recognize that happening within ourselves, that what we're saying, we might believe it emotionally, but we also can tell that that's not what we really mean. When we say everything I do is a failure, or everyone hates me, you don't really mean everything.
And going through that process helps break that event meaning fusion that happens.
Confusion.
That confusion
that has happened. That mistaken fusing that we can do.
Confusion. It's like con as in bad, and it's a bad fusion.
Counter.
They are fused in a way, but
against. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I like that. And if we can discern, so if we can discern our thinking, and we can recognize the not just even our thinking, but our perspective that we're taking, and the identity that we're forming from that relation that we're making in our mind between the meaning and the events that are happening, we can properly calibrate our capacity to have a greater sense of self and control and actual control in our environment,
and preventing the bullshit. And it's this, and it's the most insidious of bullshit. It's the self bullshit. It's the bullshit you tell yourself. Yeah. Because ultimately, somebody can deceive you and deceive you and deceive you, but they can only control you so far.
Right.
It's once you deceive yourself, is every time you do that, it gets harder and harder and harder to get out of the self-deception. It's the reverse practice.
Right.
It's like, practicing the guitar wrong. The reason why your piano teacher or your guitar teacher or whoever is all about form and doing that is if you practice it wrong, then you'll never be able to truly do
very rigid and stuck in that way.
And you hurt yourself too, like particularly like on guitar.
Practicing that way, it's going to be really hard to break that apart.
You get carpal tunnel and all other kinds of crazy stuff.
So what's happening is that we're identifying, and he described it with just a simple, horizontal line and a perpendicular vertical line. That it's not the length, of our life, but it's the depth and the fullness of our life. And so on this line of having mode, we have things like fame, fortune, that give us some sense of enjoyment, I guess, but no deep, lasting meaning, no solution to the inner turmoil and inner crisis and suffering and anxiety and depression and self-loathing and all that.
Like he said, a terrible thing to inflict on the universe is somebody who's got life fatigue and just doesn't...
Yeah, because we're going to make mistakes. We're going to screw up, and you want to condemn the universe to that for forever? Because, we're an imperfect species.
Oh, and also,
we're learning how to be better, but we're in the midst of this story. We're in the midst of the process.
Well, no star is forever either. So, nothing is forever, and it probably shouldn't.
Right.
Like if I was an omnipresent, omnipotent D&D, I'd
besides the space that makes it all possible, which does seem
and
to be
even that's debatable.
Even that, but what could pre-exist that?
Yeah,
how could something even pre-exist if it's without time?
So
there's something that's omnipresent.
What sits outside
or there's
of
an
that?
Omnipresent nature or essence to this universe. Because there had to be something that was before, so to speak, the Big Bang.
I think it's going to be a case of the further we look, the more we find, and realizing the more the further we can look. Now, I know technically, science nerds out here, don't yell at me. I know technically there's only so far that you can look, because once things get far enough away, the light has redshifted so much that we don't have any device that can pick up that light, that signal. It's such a long,
it's too far.
Drawn out. Yeah, because as light's going, it's being stretched out as it's being put out, because if it's moving away from you. Actually, and also the other end is like there's stuff that's so far away that the universe isn't old enough for the light to have gotten here yet.
That too. Yeah.
But I think the more we look out, and this is,
Well,
like
we
what
keep
we
finding
do within
there's
our
more.
mind, the more
And
we
there's
look up
larger
and we look
stars
out.
than we expect at distances.
Yep. And then once you get to I think once we get to a point and within our own consciousness and also observe the universe, then you'll be able to see the universe in a grain of sand. You'll be able to see the actual, the biggest things in the universe look exactly like the smallest things in the universe. So I think once you get subatomic, sub-quark, sub all that stuff, it ends up looking like once you get beyond galactic clusters and even beyond the images that we have of the universe that we've made on supercomputers and stuff. I think the quantum foam and the universe at its largest scale are probably the same thing. Because there's also a limit to how small we can look and actually how small we can measure at all and conceive of. It's the Planck length. And then there's a max of how big that we can see.
That's just as far as we can conceive.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And what tools do we have? Psychotechnologies are tools. They're the techniques of using psycho tools.
Yes. And we're looking for practices that help us be on that perpendicular line, that transcendent, that being mode.
Well, once you get to the limit of how far you can see, how much you can hear, how much you can smell, taste, and feel, how do you sense further into the universe and into the world? You do it with your mind, with yourself, with your understanding. Well, you can stand under it,
Right, yeah. Quite naturally.
Yeah.
What I realized while I was watching this is that we're learning about, what was it, Prakash and Prochiron.
Yeah.
And this is an inward and outward practice. So this is just like the inward and outward middle way that Buddha discovered.
Yeah.
Not too tight, not too loose. It's the way that's suggested to us in the symbol of the yin yang, that doesn't just tell us the underlying or express the underlying nature of reality, the interrelating opposites that make the whole possible, but also how one may live and be in congruence.
What a beautiful metaphor the yin yang is.
Powerful, man. It's deep.
Yeah. Well, it's
and that's a very generalizing summary of it too. You can go on that.
It really
for a few
fits
pages.
the probability. Our probability maker. It has a lot of people that can observe the duality between things that are intermixed, but then it's also applicable broadly to life, to the seasons of the world.
You like the symbol and you recognize it's true.
The
white has a little bit of black. The black has a little bit of white. Hot temperature is not possible without there being cold temperature. The bitterness of life is what makes the sweet times sweeter.
And we're able to make a metaphor for it that's instantly recognizable.
Yeah.
In a way that's nonverbal, or
power of our psychotechnology that is language.
Yeah.
And thinking in language,
and
which really ratchets up our cognitive capacity.
And we still, I think we think more symbolically than we do necessarily with words, because like you see the McDonald's M on the side of the road, you don't read McDonald's, you see the M. Same thing with the Taco Bell's bell. Same thing with stuff like that. So it's like these concepts. That's like sigil. Sigil magic works on the hacking of the brain's ability to see something and then imprint upon that recognizable something. And it's great for advertising.
Yeah, that kind of meta memory that we utilize.
Yeah.
So we can realize that we can have more control over our sense of meaning that we're applying to things in reality and to our thoughts and even our perspectives. We can look upon our own perspectives non-judgmentally, just to see them as they are, to understand them. And in the seeing, there's a clarity. I love this idea that we have control over this. We can develop wisdom. Having mode isn't going to give us the lasting meaning and fulfillment that we seek. It will never quite fill that void. The Cheetos, the Mountain Dew, the watching TV mindlessly or scrolling mindlessly, more than just for like enjoyment. Now we're looking for almost like addictive Addicted
Well, it's
in an
become
addicted fashion, like
become
just entertainment, just entertain me.
it's become
Distract
a
me.
compulsion. You know,
Yes,
we're
compulsive
we're
thing.
compelled to do
Yeah.
it by something that seems to be outside of our own agency.
Yeah, we built up a habit of being in the being mode and of trying to fulfill the being mode needs, such as meaning and fulfillment in life, with having.
Yeah.
But no matter how much soda you drink, you're not going to get lasting contentment with life. You're not going to find peace. You might have some fun mouth sensations. You might have some enjoyment, or you might have some taste bud stimulation, I could say, but you're not getting true enjoyment. The installation of
Well, you're
the
not.
celebration of what is good in life, which is what joy really is.
Enjoyment. You're not in joy.
Yeah,
You're
you
not
remember
in
those
what's
moments
good.
when you were a kid, and maybe they still happen to you, but rarely, where you get so happy for no reason that you just want to jump up and dance, and like, get this sense of celebration that somehow comes over you, just a really deep inner joy. You remember that feeling?
Yeah, I don't really get that feeling much anymore. I do in a certain way, but it's a lot deeper than just the pure innocent
It's softer and
joy
more
and
subtle as you
yippee.
get older, but
That, and I've
I
also
think we can tap back into it though, to where it's really as
sure. Well, I
powerful
definitely
as it was.
I don't I think the reason why I don't feel it so much anymore is because I've practiced not allowing myself to get too far into any one emotion because I am extremely emotionally driven.
Well, notice what it is that's getting into the emotion, because you
Yeah.
can even be aware of
Yeah.
your physiology and your psychology and your emotional states from a non-emotional detached state that is just, it's not emotional, but it's loving like a wise elder
Yeah.
is.
Well, I think a good way to get back into
It
that.
understands and it just accepts. It's like a camera recording, but it's a very wise camera.
Well, I think a good practice would be to go do something that has no expectation. So, like, you could go on a walk somewhere, and like you know the path and everything,
yeah,
but
yeah.
your expectation isn't like the end goal or anything. It's because the expectation, you'll get excited for something, but then if it doesn't happen,
No, it's just
there's
enjoy
that.
being
But
in
that's
that
well, when
place,
you're
in
a
that
little kid, you
moment.
get that feeling. You're just like, I don't know why. Like the sun's out and the clouds are, extra cool looking, and it's a really cool feeling day, and the smell of sweet grass on the wind, and it just like, yeah, all right. And I think that comes from having no expectations of anything. Like in the summertime, you may be like, well, I'm going to do this, this, and this, and that. But when you get to doing it, you're just, most of the time, you just go off on tangents. You're expecting to do something else, and you're just like, yeah, the best things are the random stuff. So like, go for that walk, not expecting anything from it. Go out to the social gathering place, whether it's, a bar, tea house, a knitting circle, a whatever, but without the expectations, maybe like, oh, I'm going to go out there and I have to do this, or I only have this much time, or,
Put the pressure on
or
yourself.
I'm going out so I can see this person or hang out with these people. I have a lot of fun. Like when I go out, that's what I do. I have no expectations, and sometimes I have a really good time. Other times I get people that try to publicly shame me. But guess what? I know I hit the disgust, things. I'm disgusted with myself. You cannot shame the shame. Thank you very much.
You cannot shame the shame.
Yeah, I am dirt people. I am what I am. Last week, I didn't have time to it's basically get off work and come right into the door. So I was just covered in paint and like that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but you
it's
don't even have to be shamed either. You can notice the shame is occurring
Yeah,
within yourself. And what is it that notices it? And is it shamed? The part of you that is aware of shame
yeah.
coming up in the body, that arising of shame within the body, something is aware of it.
I was,
How does that thing
I was-
feel? Like,
I
this
was-
is self-inquiry,
I
so
was
you
shamed.
really inquire into
yeah,
this.
I was shamed
Yeah.
a lot as a kid too. So it's just like it gets to the point where it's
Yeah.
like, I'm kind of lazy and I don't want to be feeling this anymore. So you guys can think what you want. What gets me is if I do something that breaches my moral code.
Yeah.
That and even just the small things of losing my social graces because I'm frustrated and out of time, and say something a little too short and cut with somebody. My moral standing is hold yourself to a higher standard than you're going to hold anybody else to. And if one of those things is communicating as well as possible, and not putting your own crap on somebody else. So, one of the things, I'll feel guilty by is putting my crap on other people, like, having a reaction, just being like, you know what? It's like, nah, but I don't feel shame for it. If I'm going to feel shame for anything, it'd probably be like I wear kilts a lot. So if I accidentally flash my balls to like,
that's where shame is appropriate.
Yeah. Because that's from the inside. You're not supposed to be seeing my balls. Now, mind you, if we're at a nudist beach and you see my balls, that's just what it is. But you feel no shame nobody shames you at the nudist beach more than you shame yourself. So you might as well get over it.
Yeah.
If you've ever been to one, it's not a bunch of beautiful people running around. It's all types of lumpy potato human forms. The naked body is a weird looking thing. If you want to do the objective look at things, we're this weird central lump with different lumps that have sub lumps on it. That
sub lumps on lumps. Turtles.
Yeah, then we got this lumpy thing that's lumped onto our shoulders and moving around, and
we're funny creatures.
We're an efficient machine, but we're just lumpy. Okay, so in Star Wars or Star Trek, the original series, there was these like, it was whatever species that doesn't have a corporeal form that refers to the crew as ugly bags of water. Ugly bags of water. It's just like, you ugly bags of water. It's just like, that's a really good objective way of looking at it. We're, ugly bags of water.
Meat puppet.
Yeah, meat puppet.
That one's not as pretty.
But,
it doesn't have to be gross.
I think that one. I think that one has
kind of
more notes of like you being controlled by somebody else, but still,
True.
like you would call a
or something that you inhabit.
Yeah.
That a life force inhabits a meat vessel.
Yeah. I prefer spiritually cybernetic organism.
But that's funny. We're attaching meaning to the idea. So or like meat.
That's the puppet. The meat is the
something
thing.
that we
The
have
puppet
different
is
thoughts
the meaning.
about. We associated with eating or ground up flesh of an animal, and so meat puppet sounds pretty gross or a little bit disturbing when you hear that term. But it is an actual kind of accurate representation of what we are. I mean, we got skeleton and organs and other things besides meat. But.
So the difference between a puppet,
it's the meaning that we attach that
and a marionette.
And what I see is like trees and earth. Yeah. Sorry to cut you off, but like trees and earth and starlight from whence we came and all of this. And so we're just a very unique outgrowth of a living planet, whatever a planet is, whatever a star is, whatever.
Well, without the meaning, I see us as fleshy meat puppets that are just vessels for our DNA to continue itself. But the meaning aspect of it, being able to separate that and not be nihilistic and be like, oh, it's just the genes. It's like, the meaning behind it is life is such a wonderful experience and thing that everything that is living seems to try to gear itself perfectly to live. And now
emergence seeks to emerge no matter what.
Yeah, and we're at the state now where we're meta emerging and emerging on top of emergences.
Yeah, and emergence is a law of the universe that we don't understand how it happens or why it happens, why it exists at all. But it's very beautiful. It's described as elegant.
Yes, which is powerful.
Two people
elegance and power.
Make something new. Yeah. Stars, of course, explode and create new atoms. Those atoms coalesce into planets, turn into living, animate beings.
Groups of people come together and create stories and wisdom traditions.
Planetlings. Wisdom traditions, yeah.
Earthlings are good at planning it. Earthlings planet. They plan it. I don't know.
I don't know if the Earthlings planned it, but Earth is doing it. Cosmos is doing it.
Well, we make plans on it, We're like, okay, I planned it.
The whole thing is like, no matter how much we reduce it, it's still like, I don't know what better word than miracle that we exist at all, that there even is a universe, and that parts of it at least became self-reflective.
Yeah, because you could always keep reducing down and reducing down and reducing down, and it still doesn't answer the question of, like, the why.
Why?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that why is always like pushed aside.
It's like, who cares about why?
If you don't want to deal with the why, then let's keep on working on the how. But notice that with all of our technological capacity, we still have not gotten to the end of the how. There's a lot of how that's unexplained.
I think probably with what John Vervaeke's trying to do and other people involved in this, through the looking at how like the machinery does it, will, if we do it right, help us with gaining a little bit of meaning on the why too. Because like we've been working with, the
We get
why.
to create the why.
We've got already written in these traditions that are helping us understand the whys of things to a certain point, but now we have super advanced technology that can see how the brain responds and then see reactions and actually like look at what it looks like when you see something that disgusts you or something that gives you fear or something that weird emotion you don't really have a word for that is induced by the smell of snickerdoodles. You'd be able to see it and then map it and then see the pattern of what's going on. So this is a really interesting age to be alive in, frankly, because we're combining the how and the why, and they're now starting to, if we do it right, self-enhance.
Yeah. Yeah, because even if we don't think the why is their universe is important, why is there a why?
Yeah. Well, because
Why is there a why now?
Because there's something that must be the cause of.
Well, I'm sure there's like some nice hows as to there being a why, but I want to know why the why.
Yeah.
Why can't we question why? Why are we self-aware?
Yeah.
And if it's just the consequence of cause and effect, what began that? If time and space were supposed to have exploded out from some impossible infinitesimal source, what is that source? How is this miracle possible? And why? I don't know. I guess the why is what we do get to partake in, though. That's the co-creative aspect of it, because we do notice that the thing does have cause and effect play into it, but it also has this deep sense of meaning-making potential, and that's really interesting. That's very exciting. So I guess let's catch ourselves up here because we're getting on. Let's get back to our notes here.
Pretty much is like give the credit, give the West its credit. We don't have to just go to the East. The West does have its own tradition, and
which is going to be more comprehensible because it's in our cultural language. But it doesn't mean don't go to the East.
Yeah, it just
also take from the East what is useful for you and comprehensible.
Don't throw one out for the
you don't have to do an either or kind of process here. And we do have a very rich history of not just inner practice but outer practices and the marrying of those two here in the West as well, which we're recognizing now. So we are looking for awakening experiences in life because they allow us to lose the fear of our mortality and our association with existential
fatality.
Our existential fatalism that we can develop. Yeah. So this fullness of being helps us grow beyond our existential issues and our distress over more. Yeah, we said that. The rediscovery of Stoicism, Platonism, and so forth here in the West is definitely helping us hedge the meaning crisis. But we don't, like you said, have to just look for one or another tradition. We can dive deep.
Yeah.
Though here in the West as well. So we may salvage the meaning-making processes, wisdom, and align them with the science of reason and rationality that we have developed as well. And now we return to the axial age.
We are
or at least the reverberations of the axial age in Israel.
After the Hellenistic period, the West reverted to a pre-axial age.
Pre-axial, there you go.
Thank you. This new religion that has come around is not an axial.
That's right, because axial is the revolution part. Yeah, it's the pre-axial.
So kind of reverted
cosmos association that we had.
Yeah. So where men could become kings, or kings God. Could become gods, and
or a human could actually be an incarnation of God.
Yeah, that sets us up for the Jesus.
The Jesus. All right, guys, let's jump back into it.
The two worlds were understood, if you remember, in terms of moving from the land of slavery to the promised land, where the real world is the future and God is this open creator, and we are trying to sense the have faith in, participatory knowing of, involvement in the course of history, and sometimes we're distorted in that and we trespass, we fall off course, and we have to be redeemed, we have to be brought back on course by prophets who speak God's attempt to get us back on track with making the future. This whole idea of co-creating with God the open future such that we can bring about a promised land for human beings. Now there is a person, a Jewish person, who is born into that tradition and is responsible in ways that are very hard to determine historically for a radical transformation. Right? And of course this is Jesus of Nazareth. And probably the most pretentious thing I'm going to do is trying to speak about Jesus of Nazareth. I mean, literally, many millions of people believe he was God. Not metaphorically, not symbolically, but literally, metaphysically. I am respectful of this fact. I don't agree with it, at least in very standard interpretations. My endeavor is to not try and give some final complete version of this. That would be hubris and arrogance on my part. My endeavor is to try and explain what Jesus via Christianity did to that Israelite axial legacy, because that is what is relevant to what we are discussing here and now. The battles, the interminable and I think ultimately undecidable battles, even though many people claim to have reached the final conclusion about who Jesus was and what Jesus did, are not something I'm going to try and resolve here. We're even going to see when we take a look at the Gnostics that there is, right from the beginning, multiple competing interpretations and how that has had deep historical influence. So, if you remember, we used a Greek term from Paul Tillich, because the New Testament, the part of the Bible that talks about Jesus and the advent of Christianity, was actually written in Greek. So Tillich, the same Paul Tillich who wrote The Courage to Be, talked about kairos, about that perspectival participatory knowing, knowing the fullness of time, knowing exactly the right time. So some, right, that are going to, the right timing to shift the course of events. What Pascal, when we come to Pascal, we'll talk about is the spirit of finesse. The right, you're not yet in a romantic relationship with Susan, and you kiss her, and is it the right time? If you get the timing right, if the kairos is right, then the course of your relationship is altered, transformed, and your identity and her identity are changed. Now, the Israelite conception was for the whole nation, and God would intervene kairotically at moments in history. Christianity is going to propose this radical idea that God's creative logos, the word he speaks through the prophets, that it's the same word by which he speaks things into existence, the word that helps create history, the word that causes kairos, makes kairos possible for us. So logos doesn't mean just spoken words. It means like the intelligibility, the formative principle, the underlying structure. Christianity, it's in the Gospel of John, anarche and logos. In the beginning was the logos. A passage actually probably lifted from Stoicism. But what is John appropriating it to say? He's saying that God's capacity for producing kairos through logos has been identified or to use an older term, incarnated in a particular individual. That Jesus of Nazareth is actually the ultimate kairos, that all the other kairoses were pointing to him and are summed up in him. That he represents the ultimate turning point. And he represents it not only historically, he represents it personally. Because he is a person, you can identify with him, and that kairos can come to take place in you personally. Just like Socrates personalizes the axial revolution and brings it into a direct personal confrontation, the encounter with Jesus means that you too can experience a profoundly personal kairos, which Jesus seems to have spoken about using a metaphor of being born again, about such a radical metanoia, a radical shifting. This is often translated as conversion, until you read about that, right? But this word is much closer to awakening. Noia means noticing. This is your perspectival awareness. And meta means beyond. This means a radical transformation in your salience landscape, a radical transformation of, right, what it's like to be you. It's this deeply perspectival and participatory transformation. And Jesus is saying he incarnates the principle by which you can intervene in your own personal history, or by which maybe you want to say intervention can occur in your own personal history, such that this metanoia, you will have a new mind, a new heart, a new modal existence. You will be born again. What's going on there? What does this kairos look like? What could possibly so radically transform my salience landscape, my sense of self, my processes of co-identification? What could bring that about? And now I'm going to say the word, and then you're going to laugh because it sounds like a Hallmark card. The Christian answer is love, and now we all titter. Ha ha ha! That's so quaint. Ha ha! Love. Sounds like, oh, love. Okay. The problem with that, as you've seen many times, is that this word is trivialized for us. We use one word to talk about so many different things, like I love peanut butter cookies. I love Canada. I love Sarah. I love my son. I love a really good, right, game of tennis. Are those the same? We're even confused about this. We think that love is an emotion. No, it's not. Love is a modal way of being. Love isn't a feeling, and it is not an emotion. How do I know this? Because loving someone can be expressed by being sad when they're absent, being happy when they're present, being jealous when there's somebody else around, being angry when they're neglecting you. Love isn't a feeling. It isn't an emotion. It is a modal way of being. It is an agent-arena relationship. And what Jesus seemed to be incarnating as a kairos to change the history of the world and to offer you to change your own personal history is a different kind of love. This is agape. We have to distinguish between three kinds of love: eros, philia, and agape. See, eros is the love that seeks to be one with something. And that can be spiritual, like being one with nature, or it can be being one with a cookie by eating it. Of course, we come to think of eros erotically, right? Being one with somebody by having sex with them. Right? But remember, Socrates knew ta erotica, which wasn't just sex. Socrates knew what to care about. This is philia. So this is the love that is satisfied through consummation. Philia, this is the love that seeks cooperation. This is the love in which we experience reciprocity. We love the cookie because we can consume it. We love our friends because we are in reciprocity with them. What kind of love is this? And this is what Jesus claimed was how God loved individuals. This is the love that a parent has for a child. This is not the love of consummation. You're not trying to consume the child. That's evil. And it's not friendship. You're not, like, when you bring a child home from the hospital, and I've done this twice, right? That's not your friend. It's not even a person. You can't, it's basically a slug. But here's the astonishing thing. You love it. Not because of any way you can consume it or be one with it. Ew. Ew. You don't love it because, hey, what, great friendship. You love it, right? You love it because by loving it, you turn a non-person into a person. It's the closest thing to a miracle, and that sounds hackney, I know, but stop back and think about this. You depend on agape. It's because people loved you before you were a person that you have become the person you are. Love turns non-person animals into moral agent persons. It's like somehow if I could just care about, right, my sofa enough, it would turn into a Ferrari or something. It's that powerful. And here's what Jesus was offering. That love can be exacted and made available for all. Here's what is on offer. Here's why Christianity will take the Roman Empire culturally. With agape, Christianity can say to all of the non-persons of the Roman Empire, all the women, all the children, all the non-male citizens, all the sick, all the poor, all the widowed, can take all of those non-persons and say, we will turn you into persons. Persons that belong to the kingdom of God. We'll take another look at this in more detail next time. Thank you very much for your time and attention.
Meow, 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 meow. Ruff, ruff, ruff. Meow. Ruff, ruff, ruff. Meow. Ruff, 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 ruff.
Meow.
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 Meow, see? I'll grab the tuna. Meow, see?
Meow, see? Meow.
So, we talked about Kairos, which Kairos is the properly timed event or thing. So, in musical terms...
It's like a fullness of potential, right?
And at the right time. So in musical terms, it would be like you're building up to this thing, and at just the right time, you make the turn. You either get quiet, you get louder, or you switch to another chord, right? The logos.
Yeah, it's a moment that's pregnant with potential.
And so the logos, the called the word.
God's creative logos, the word that he speaks in order to prompt.
And not just...
through prophets, but also to make existence come forth, is what creates Kairos.
Yeah, and so not just voice in the sense of like the words, but like the deeper meaning, the rules and layerings below it. So like
the underlying structure and intelligibility behind
in musical
language.
sense, this would be your music theory. You know the theory, and then you're able to enact the Kairos at the right periods of time to make miracles happen.
And this is logos is also even deeper than the musical notes. It's the underlying structure of reality that makes notes and music possible and language possible. So in the beginning was the Word, God's capacity for producing Kairos. That's this like flux of reality, of existence, this pure potential energy, you could think. And he produces kairos through this, and now he's producing kairos through logos that has been incarnated into a person.
Mm-hmm.
So the ultimate potential also becomes the ultimate turning point as a person.
Yes.
It's now coming through a human being.
And this person is the ultimate kairos. Or kairos. There's been many kairoses before, but this is the ultimate kairos.
Yes. Yes. This is ingenious for a guy that, as Vervaeke, that doesn't seem to believe in God in the traditional sense, or that Christ was perhaps incarnated in at least the traditional interpretation. He spoke on this in such a powerful and beautiful way, how we can experience being born again. And people do indeed experience this through Christianity, this metanoia, which is awakening into our noticing, basically like meta being beyond noia, noticing. So even beyond noticing, down there into the deep logos, it can radically transform us. And it's Jesus is bringing this out for the people. You too can experience kairos,
and
through this way that I am sharing.
And when it's said, when Christians say, accept Jesus into your heart, and you'll experience the divine kingdom of heaven and all that stuff. It's more than just those words. You're not accepting this, like Jesus was a guy, right? But he was also God.
You're not just supposed to believe this. You're supposed to be faithful and that you're dutiful to this ideal that he presents, this potential.
And, this way, if you will. And you can do it too. You can be your ultimate kairos. You can be the ultimate agent of change within your life, just like he was the story of the ultimate agent of change at the right period of time. 2000.
It's like he gave this ultimate sacrifice for us to be able to actuate this potential.
Yeah.
It's a deep story, man, when you start to see it through.
Well, and it's
eyes,
empowering in the truest sense of the word, not like the way we use it, but it literally empowers the meekest among us.
Yeah.
And gives everybody equal access to this agent arena relationship.
And to this agape love that isn't just for one's own children, but is family person.
But extended the same love you have for your child, but extended out onto others.
to everyone else. Yeah,
not a consumptive love.
It's a love that turns non-persons into a person.
Yeah.
Like a child, it helps it grow into a mature, responsible human being. Best case scenario. Love creates moral agents.
Yeah,
and this love can be available to all. And I love the idea that all non-persons can be people. That includes the widows.
Yeah.
That includes the orphans. That includes the poor. The poor is as important as
the
the
homeless
emperor.
that you don't notice on the street no more.
This was revolutionary.
Yeah. Well, yeah, there's a reason why they nailed him to a piece of wood.
Dude.
It's what he say, shut him up. What was that, Bill Hicks? What he say, shut him up. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And, I like Vervaeke's approach to explaining it too. It wasn't the mystical, metaphysical end of it. It was the core root of what was this story getting at and what was this individual getting at. Because even if Jesus never even historically existed, still this message of being your own ultimate kairos and conduit of the logos of God moving through you. That's the important message. So to be born again isn't this, I accepted Jesus and I'm fine now. No, being born again is I'm accepting this way, I'm growing, I'm becoming a true person, opposed to just a mask, or opposed to just the persona.
Yeah, more than just a persona, but an actual moral agent, an awakening moral agent that is radically transformed because it's seen through the orientation of agape love now. Because we have eros, the love of being one with something. We
The
associate this with
consuming,
erotica,
yeah.
but it could be also with really being into a process, a practice, a sport, music,
Being into
consuming something. I
the
think.
group. I think like, you know.
And then the philia is the consumption, the consummation, cooperation, reciprocal.
Well, no.
I'm sorry, consummation, cooperation.
That would be
Reciprocity, that's-
eros. That would be the bringing something into you.
No. That's philia.
No, philia is the friendship. Like your
Philia is
buddy.
friendship, which is consummation, cooperation, and reciprocity. Yes, definitely. Trust. Look back on it. The eros is definitely to be one with something, like a cookie, erotica, a moment. Agape is the love that you can have unconditionally for a child and for others as well. In fact, and I love that he helps us understand that love is not an emotion. You can feel sad when you love somebody and you've lost them, or they're going through pain. You can be jealous, you can be envious, you can be all these things. Love has many emotions that can occur within. But love itself is an orientation. It's a modal way of being. It's not a feeling. We are constantly approaching love with having mode, and so we're thinking of it as a feeling that we want to have. But it's really an orientation. It's a way of approaching life. And so it's sad and it's unfortunate that love is trivialized. But hopefully we can help re-inform our understanding of that word by the practice of agape, of this orientation, this unconditionality to life. And remember to use that for yourselves. Be unconditional to yourself too.
Yeah.
Like, don't judge yourself so heavily. Recognize when you've done something that isn't living up to your highest vision of potential being, but don't beat yourself up for it mercilessly. Just recognize and grow on. Love yourself like a wise elder caring for a helpless child.
Yeah, because, like, why would you love the child? Like you said, they're just little slugs. Oh, but out of that little slug, you can make a person.
Yeah.
And we do that too. You'll have like mentorships and, older, wiser men taking a liking to young chap that's got some potential and then trying to
What's the deepest
make a
sense
better
of meaning?
person out of them.
Yeah.
That's
deepest sense of meaning and fulfillment a human can experience is agape.
Oh.
Yeah. That's why, someone that was a great ball player can go on and become a coach and get more fulfillment from being a coach than even if he went pro and he won the World Series and all these things. It's like literally he gets more out of seeing it through somebody else accomplish it, that he's helped do that. So he's living through them, but not even vicariously. He's like reveling in someone else's joy.
Yeah.
And that's actually how we're tuned to survive long term as a super social species. We really love to see each other succeed and do amazing things. That's why those Humans Are Awesome videos blew up, some years ago. And it's like showing people like surfing waves and doing crazy dances and flips and all kinds of awesome things that humans can do. We celebrate it even when it's a stranger.
Yeah.
I like that. I dig that too. So
Yeah.
I think it's about that time.
I'm turning into a pumpkin.
That was a good episode, guys. Thank you for joining us on this one. And look forward to next episode, because now we get deep into Christianity and agape.
Yeah, not in the metaphysical way or the just accept it and you'll be fine kind of way either. I'm a Christian myself, but I got a problem with that whole just accept him into your heart. But I'm like, you're not getting anywhere with that. Just telling him to step outside of the box doesn't tell them what to do outside the box. It's like, man, come on, man.
Yeah, so this isn't to condemn Christianity. It's not even to sell it either. It's actually to appreciate the genius of humans as we figured, like the genius of humans.
What were the lessons
we've developed together in our different cultures. And unfortunately, institutions take over these things. They become institutionalized. They often lose that original juice, and they become stale, sometimes stagnant, sometimes even dangerous misrepresentations of an original ideal. And we see this has happened with many different religions. Even Buddhism has had sects that have gone wild and violent. Yeah, it happens all over the world.
A church is only as good as its congregation. So a religion or a practice or a church or a philosophy is only as good as those who practice within it, get together and convene and make it, and if we get, I think my biggest gripe with modern Protestant Christianity is it's become very personally lazy. Like, it feels good to go there and, hear the rock music and do all that stuff. But
how is that
how involved are you with the community at your church in a way that's more than just, oh, well, we're doing the potluck and then we're doing this other thing, Like, how much meaning making are you making with each other? How much are you help creating better people out of each other?
Yeah, or how much are you shying away from out of discomfort?
And so if you go way back in, the dark ages of Christianity, where the church was, the dominant ruling force and super, super corrupt, well, how to get that way?
Corrupt individuals.
Corrupt people allowed it to be that way, and people who refused to speak out. So,
yeah, all these religions have their cultural baggaging. We can look at it that way.
Hey man, we are nothing but travelers, and some travelers pack lighter than others, but we all got our own baggage we got to pick up at the end of the day. So
yeah,
yeah.
Yeah, we really do.
Yeah.
We have very high expectations for humanity, which is a good thing.
Good, yes.
But we shouldn't hold ourselves accountable for what we should be at the very end of our evolution, like some perfect angel ideal.
Yeah, we shouldn't in mass.
We're in the midst of the story.
Or,
the fact that we're here already, where we're at, is actually really good. And I tried to express that last episode, and I hope these ideas get through. I hope that they make sense to people, because you see a lot of shaming going on in the world today, and it's a lot of judgment, and it's really heavy, and it's very overgeneralizing and superficial typically too. It's always looking at superficial distinctions,
and it usually harms the people that are dishing it out more than it harms the people who have
absolutely,
to take
man.
it,
People are miserable that are in that mind state. It's sad, and I've been there. We can all get there. We are always, not always, but we are quite consistently, constantly othering one another in this world, and it's doing nobody any good.
Yeah, so instead of being like, oh, they're the others in another group, it's like, oh no, they're the others of this one big group, the others of the group,
Right.
Yeah. Opposed to
additional
the other,
people.
Additional
opposed
different,
to
some are
different and worthy of apprehension and fear or aggression and anger and stereotyping and this and that. We're trying to understand our environments as well as we can, so we do have that process of generalizing that our mind does. We learned about that as well. These cognitive techniques that our brain utilizes to be able to take in everything, because it can't consider it all. But we should take the moment, the time to see one another as we are in this moment, rather than with labels and ideas that we put over them. And don't just do this with people. Do this with something like a tree. Take the word tree, peel the label tree from any tree that you see in your environment, and see this crazy thing that's fractaling out of the ground, that's consequent of earth and sunlight, and what the heck is this thing? And look how it's like trained itself out to perfectly be able to catch the sun from so many different angles, and it even slowly moves its leaves, the things that we call leaves. What are those? Look at all of it, to question, what is this existence? And look within with self-inquiry to question, who am I? And to think about all the ideas of yourself that you've had throughout your life, and all of your attachments, and the story that we keep on finding ourselves rewriting ourselves into, where we keep on falling into these narratives. And when we're just believing in narratives, are we actually really in communion with reality?
Yeah.
But yeah, on that tired note, guys, let's wind
sorry,
down.
I'm just getting sleepy.
Yeah, it's about time for us to wrap it up, and I hope all of you out there are doing well. Be sure to like and subscribe if you like this. Check out John Vervaeke if you like him as well. Check out American Dharma on February 10th, Friday, in Baltimore at Zen West. We're going to be rocking with Benny OK and who else? Kenny and Rise 8. And then February 11th, we're going to be in Hedgesville at Seven Moons at Unit 6, right next door to Seven Moons, actually. And that is going to be an event with Cannon Hill and Rattle Root. It's going to be a hell of a fun time.
Rattle Root. That sounds like a dancing tree.
They seem really cool. I dig what they're doing. I checked a little bit of their stuff out. We love Cannon Hill, and we're great friends with all those guys
Bunch
as well.
of knuckleheads.
Benny OK is friggin' great too, man. They're a really great band. Rise 8 is really cool. So, yeah, I mean, and Zen West is an amazing venue. So, yeah, February 10th and February 11th, because Seven Moons is also a really, really cool little wellness shop where you can get all kinds of beautiful spiritual knickknacks and
that's
books
right.
and crystals
Up
and
in Hedgesville. Yeah.
incense. And
Hedgesville's an interesting little town. It's like literally a postage stamp, and
massages you can get.
yeah, they have that. And also right down the street is a specialty pet food place where you can get all your non-GMO, properly whatever balanced foods for all your stuff.
Yeah, I've been there. Indeed.
And you can get good local honey down the street the other way.
Yum.
Little tiny forgotten postage stamp town.
Yeah, buy from your locals, your local friends and fam, independent businesses, guys.
As much as you can.
Walmart's got enough.
Yeah, well, and even beyond that is the Amazon, dude.
Oh,
If
true
that
that.
Walmart was bad, now it's Walmart in your pocket.
Bezos got enough too.
Yeah, right. He's got enough. All right.
He's not doing. I don't know. I'm not going to go off there.
Yeah.
Let that one go.
Rada.
Yes. What are you doing? What are you doing with all of that amassed wealth there, buddy? Mr. Bill Gates also.
Oh yeah. Well, don't get me started on that, schmuck.
Yeah. No, let's be careful before we get ourselves
Yeah. In
kicked
trouble.
off of,
Yeah.
All right. We love you guys.
Love you.
We love you too, big brother. And talk to you soon.